history is more than dates and names. It's a collection of moments that shaped who we are. Moments of courage and consequence. Of triumph, tragedy, and the choices that changed everything. Each story I tell is a window into one of those turning points, a reminder of where we've been and what it cost to get here. Some moments define history. This is one of them. June 6, 1944. Dawn breaks over the cold, gray waters of the English Channel. Thousands of ships stretch from horizon to horizon, their decks crowded with young men staring into the mist ahead, toward Normandy, toward history. This is the story of Operation Overlord, the largest amphibious invasion in history, a turning point that would determine the fate of the free world. By 1944, Nazi Germany had occupied most of Western Europe for 4 long years. France had fallen in 6 weeks back in 1940. Belgium, the Netherlands, Denmark, and Norway were under German control. Across the continent, occupation had become a way of life, one marked by fear, resistance, and oppression. The Soviet Union was pushing from the east, slowly clawing back territory at a staggering human cost. Entire cities had been leveled, and millions of soldiers and civilians were already dead. But the Red Army could not win the war alone. To truly defeat Hitler, the Allies needed a Western front, a new line of attack that would divide the German army and relieve the pressure on the Soviets. It would also signal to the world that freedom still had strength, and that Europe could be liberated from within, not merely conquered again by another power. So the Western Allies began preparing for what would become the most complex military operation ever attempted, a return to the European mainland 4 years after being driven from it at Dunkirk. The plan, codenamed Operation Overlord, had been years in the making, an audacious gamble that demanded total secrecy, meticulous planning, and unimaginable courage. In December of 1943, Allied leaders, Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin, met in Tehran. They agreed on one goal: open a new front in Western Europe. Command of this monumental operation fell to General Dwight D. Eisenhower, calm, resolute, and skilled in uniting men from many nations. Under him, British General Bernard Montgomery planned the ground assault, while Admiral Bertram Ramsay commanded the naval forces. Air Chief Marshal Trafford Lee Mallory led the skies. It was a coalition of willpower, logistics, and hope. The Allies gathered more than 2 million soldiers in southern England. They amassed 5,000 ships, 11,000 aircraft, and enough supplies to feed an army for months. But before a single soldier could land, the Germans had to be deceived. Operation Bodyguard was that deception. The Allies built fake armies, complete with inflatable tanks and wooden aircraft. Radio chatter hummed with false orders. General George S. Patton, whom Hitler considered the Allies' most aggressive commander, was placed in charge of a phantom army in southeast England, supposedly preparing to invade at Pas-de-Calais. German intelligence believed it. Normandy was left only lightly defended compared to Calais, a deception that would save thousands of lives. June 5th was to be D-Day, the day the Allies would cross the Channel and begin the liberation of Europe. But nature had other plans. A violent storm swept across the English Channel, churning the seas into chaos and grounding aircraft across southern England. Winds howled, rain lashed the coasts, and waves rose so high that even seasoned sailors grew uneasy. In a small room at Southwick House near Portsmouth, General Dwight D. Eisenhower gathered his commanders for what would become one of the most consequential meetings of the war. Around him sat the men responsible for the fate of millions: Air Chief Marshal Lee Mallory, Admiral Ramsey, and General Montgomery. The forecast was grim. If they launched now, the invasion could end in disaster before it even began. But meteorologists brought a sliver of hope, a brief window of calmer weather expected on the morning of June 6th. Eisenhower studied the charts, listened to each man's counsel, and weighed the risks in silence. The room was tense, the air heavy with uncertainty. Thousands of ships were already at sea, waiting for the word. Finally, Eisenhower looked up. His voice was calm, but firm. "Okay," he said quietly. "Let's go." In the pre-dawn hours of June 6th, paratroopers from the U.S. 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, along with the British 6th Airborne, dropped behind enemy lines. Their mission: capture bridges, destroy communication lines, and throw the German defense into chaos. They leapt into darkness, buffeted by wind and enemy fire, scattered miles off course. Many landed alone, miles from their intended drop zones, surrounded by unfamiliar terrain and German patrols. Yet, through confusion and courage, small groups banded together, seizing villages, holding crossroads, and cutting off reinforcements long enough for the invasion to reach the beaches. At dawn, the naval bombardment began. Battleships thundered against the coast. Waves of landing craft surged toward 5 code-named beaches, each with its own objective and its own fate. Utah, Gold, Juneau, Sword, Omaha. At Utah Beach, the U.S. 4th Infantry Division landed nearly a mile off target, but luck was on their side. They met lighter resistance and pushed inland, linking with airborne troops before noon. The British and Canadians stormed Gold, Juneau, and Sword beaches. Despite mines, artillery, and rough seas, they advanced rapidly inland. At Omaha Beach, it was hell on earth. The 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions faced a wall of fire from entrenched German positions. Machine guns tore through the surf, cutting down men before they even touched the shore. Mortar shells exploded in the water, turning the sea red with blood and shrapnel. Landing craft were ripped apart before reaching the sand, their ramps dropping into chaos and death. And still, they went forward. Young men, many barely 20 years old, leapt into freezing water up to their necks, holding rifles above their heads as bullets cracked around them. Some drowned beneath the weight of their packs. Others dragged the wounded to safety, only to fall themselves moments later. There was no cover, only open beach, barbed wire, and the will to move forward. For hours, chaos reigned. Officers were dead or missing. Units were shattered. Communication broke down. And yet, amidst the smoke and terror, small groups of men began to crawl, then run, then climb, inch by inch, scaling the cliffs under relentless fire. By midday, they had broken through. By evening, Omaha was secure, but at a terrible cost. Over 2,000 American soldiers lay dead or wounded on that stretch of sand, their courage buying the first fragile foothold of freedom in Western Europe. By nightfall, more than 156,000 Allied troops were ashore. Yet their sacrifice cracked Hitler's Atlantic Wall. It opened the door to the liberation of Europe. Within a week, 250,000 men and 50,000 vehicles were in Normandy. Within a month, Paris was free. The road to victory had begun. The beaches of Normandy are quiet now. The wind moves across the sand where so many once fell. The noise of battle is long gone, but the memory remains. Beneath this ground rests the story of courage, of sacrifice, of ordinary men who did something extraordinary when history demanded it. Today, rows of white markers overlook the sea they crossed. Each one marks a life given, reminding us of the price of freedom. The world they helped to free still stands because of what they did here, and remembering them reminds us of what courage can cost and what it can achieve. Thank you for watching. If history matters to you, if these stories move you, I invite you to subscribe and join me as we continue to remember the moments that shaped our world. Some moments define history. This was one of them.